Absolutely.
Welcome back, everyone, to our workshop about farm labor and how food connects us. Or if this is your first day coming, welcome for the first time. Today, we have the pleasure of a really special guest. I'm really looking forward to today's presentation. We are joined by David Bacon. David is a journalist and a photographer, as well as an activist and a union organizer. And all of these different roles are combined, I think, for him. Since the 1980s, he has been documenting the lives and the social movements of migrants, farm workers, and communities impacted by globalization. And his work has taken him all over the world. He's worked in the US and Latin America and Asia, Europe, and Iraq, but much of his work really focuses on California and on the US-Mexico border. And he's published several books, including my favorite, In the Fields of the North, which combines photographs and oral histories. One of the things that I really appreciate about David's work as a social historian is his focus on human stories. In his work, David becomes part of the communities that he documents, and this allows him to provide us with a really unique firsthand account of the individual experiences that make up larger, broader movements and histories of labor and activism. So in his photographs, we see how big things like globalization impact on individuals and on human lives. So I'm really pleased to introduce him. Today, David is going to present some of his photographs, and he's going to use them to think through issues confronting farm workers today, including COVID-19 and immigration. And I believe he's going to be asking you to respond to some of these images. And when he asks you to do so, you can either put your comments in the chat, or you can raise your hand. You can use the raise my hand function, and we'll call on you and you can make your comments to the group. So get ready to listen and look and participate in our ongoing conversation. Over to you, David.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this today. And it's exciting to be here with teachers and students and parents, and having been all of those things myself. I'm glad to be here. So what we're going to do today is we are going to explore the world of farm workers through photographs. And so I'm going to show you photographs as we go along here. And I'm going to talk at a couple of points. I have some oral histories that I'm going to read from of people who are in the photographs, farm workers. And part of the whole idea here is to make this a dialogue. This is not a lecture. This is sort of like a dialogue between all of you and myself. And I think we'll learn a lot more the more people participate. So I hope that you do raise your hand or make comments in the chat or respond to the questions that I'm going to ask. They're not very complicated questions. They're pretty simple ones, but I think they require us to think a little bit. So, and then at the end, if we have time, I have some photographs and we could break up into breakout groups, and you can talk about the photographs and then come back and tell us what you've thought or learned from them. So we'll get as far as we can given the amount of time that we have. So, I hope everybody can see the screen and you can hear me. And first of all, I'm sorry for our technical difficulties here. So to start out with, I want to talk about a little bit about the fact that about 3 years ago, we had a show about farm workers on the border wall in Tijuana. This was a result of a conference that I went to in Tijuana that was called El Gran Mexico. And the idea was that we have about 10% of the population of Mexico that lives north of the border here. And so in a lot of ways, Mexico exists here too. And so what we were documenting with these photographs here was the reality of life north of the border. And of course, if you're looking at the US from Tijuana and from this side of the border, here in the US, we are the north. And so we called this show In the Fields of the North, or in Spanish, it's En los Campos del Norte. And so this is kind of what that show looked like. And you can see the border wall here going down into the ocean. So, when we put up the show, it was very interesting because a number of people in the park that's next to the wall on the Mexican side, they came up to me and they said that they recognized some of the places in the photographs from their own experience. And I found that really kind of strange and interesting because for Mexicans, for people on that side of the wall, California is a very familiar place. People know a lot of the places and they can look at the photographs and they can recognize them. But for most of us living on the north side of the wall, Mexico is much less familiar to us. So after all, if we showed photographs of the fields in Baja California on the US side of the wall, and I asked you where they were, or if you were familiar with them, very few people here in the US would really kind of know where we were. So it's just a way of saying, or just a way of looking at the fact that many, many, many people from Mexico come and live and work here in the United States. And we are very, our whole system of agriculture and farms and the food that we eat is very dependent on this fact, and we hardly ever even really talk about it. According to the Department of Labor here in the US, about 53% of all farm workers here in this country are undocumented, and about 95% of all the farm workers in this country, and there are about 2.5 million farm workers, so we're talking about a lot of people. About 95% of the farm workers in this country are from Mexico at one time or another. In other words, some people have lived here for a very long time. Some people are actually the sons and daughters of people who came from Mexico, but a very large number of people are people who have come from Mexico in the relatively recent past. And as I said, more than half of them are people who are coming here without papers. So let's take a look at this guy here. He's a worker whose picture I took in the southern San Joaquin Valley. And what is he doing here? He's putting food on the table for us, in this case, jalapenos, chiles, right? But being undocumented, he's in danger of being deported. So the question I have really is, why? If we're benefiting from the work that he's doing and we're going to eat what he's picking, why should he be deported? And what's going to happen to his family if he is? And who's going to do this work if he gets deported and has to leave the country? So that was my first question to you, looking at this photograph and looking at the human face of this young man, picking the peppers. What do you think? What do you think? Anybody have something that they want to say here?
So I'll remind people you can use the raise your hands function, and you'll see that if you click on reactions, or you can put comments in the chat.
What will happen to his family, for instance?
Nora, you've raised your hand. Go for it.
I just want to tell you my story because I was a migrant farm worker, child migrant farm worker, and sorry about that. So, like I said, we worked from sun up to sundown, and we had a jug of water, which was full of mud, on the bottom. And we were lucky we even had that water. My mother was 8 months pregnant, dragging herself across the dirt, picking the strawberries and fruit. And I mean, they were spraying DDT on our heads, so we shake our white hair with all that poison off of us. And you had these cloth knee pads that would just be shredded by the dirt, and I could feel the rocks in the dirt cutting through my skin, my knees, because as a child, your skin is thin just as you're an adult. It was very harsh. And when we would one bathroom, one room, and we would stand in line. I was in our, where we lived in the little trailer. And, you know, we're just doing the bathroom dance. I need to go to the restroom, I'm showering. Oh, and then they did have one porta potty, and my sister was using it, and the truck would pick it up and take her away miles. So I had to go run and chase my sister. I was worried, where are they taking my sister, you know? And so it was kind of, was scary and harsh as a child. And yeah, deportations, it's payday, so you don't have to get a check. They just pick up, round up the people that worked and free labor. So yeah, that's the way it rolled.
Well, thank you, Nora. That's very moving, your account of your own experience here. And I think that what you described is certainly what the reality is for many, many people. So, you know, it would be the reality for this young woman who is weeding in a field of potatoes, you know, because it's an organic field. They can't spray weed killer on Roundup on the weeds so that the potato plants themselves can get harvested. You know, people are going to go in and do this work, and that's what she's doing. Is she is basically pulling up the weeds, and behind her we see something else that's very common to the lives of workers, and that is the forewoman of the crew is watching her. And, you know, why do you think that the four lady of the crew here is so interested in how this young woman is doing her weeding job? You know, this is really the experience of being pressured to work fast, basically. Also, you know, look at her, you know, we're looking at her, you know, kind of, I'm shooting this picture sort of from the ground up towards her so that we can see her hands, we can see, you know, the bag that she's pulling. But the other thing that we can kind of see pretty clearly here is that this work requires her to bend over all the time. And so you can imagine at the end of a day of doing work like this, what it feels like. And here's another, an older woman doing the same job, and you can see the weeds in her hand and the bag that she is, you know, going to stick those weeds in as she's picking. You know, it's interesting because, you know, because it is an organic field, there's not as much pesticide on the plants, which is certainly good for the workers, but everything else about the job is really the same, whether it's an organic field or not. So sometimes I think we think that if we're buying organic food at the supermarket, that this is healthy for us, and therefore it's got to be healthier for the people who are producing the food. And in some ways it is, because, you know, there's less pesticide on the plants as the workers are working here. But on the other hand, the wages are the same, and bending over all day is the same. So the conditions of work are really actually very similar. Here's another thing that's pretty familiar about the lives of farm workers in the Imperial Valley, which is one of the main agricultural areas of California. And here what we're looking at, we are looking at a line of workers as they are crossing the border from Mexicali into Calexico, into the US to go to work. So when you're looking at these guys here in the line, and then first of all, you know, what time of year do you think we're looking at here? You know, how are people dressed? You know, summer, winter, spring, fall. What do you think about, and also look at the expressions on their faces. They are waiting to go to work. What does that kind of make you feel? Anybody have a thought about that?
Laura, do you want to say something?
Did you say Nora? Did you say me?
I
Well, you
said
know,
Laura Garcia has her hand up.
Hi.
oh, not Nora.
First of all, Mr. Bacon, David Bacon, I can call you David, I guess. I have to say that your photographs are very moving and very reminiscent of another person whose photographs I love very much and are related to Native Americans, and that are the Curtis photographs. And what I immediately jumped to in my head are the lessons I taught around Francisco Jimenez's book. I teach third grade, by the way, his book, La Mariposa, and then reading The Circuit. And these pictures just kind of like bring all those emotions back. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, these workers lining up to go to work on the border, this is something that they do every morning. You know, cross the border, get on a bus or in a car, go to work, cut lettuce, cut asparagus, get back in the car, go back across the border, and then go back home, walk back home to their homes in Mexicali in Mexico. So they have what's called a border crossing card, which enables them to do this. It's not really so much a favor to them, it's a favor to the growers and the ranchers of the Imperial Valley, because if they weren't able to do this, they wouldn't be able to grow lettuce or grow asparagus, and we wouldn't be, you know, eating it in the supermarket if workers weren't doing this. But let's look at this one here. You know, this is a home of workers, strawberry pickers in this case, and this is near San Diego. So it's not far from the border either. But these are workers, workers living here who don't have papers. And of course, once they cross the border and they get here and they start working, they can't go home to their homes in Mexico and come back the following morning. They have to do their best to try to stay here in the US, and sometimes living in conditions that are like this. But I want you to look at this photograph really carefully here, because here is the shack that was built by some workers in a ravine north of San Diego, near some strawberry fields where they're working. And look at what's up on top of the hill there. That's a house too, but it's not exactly, it's not anything like the house that the worker is living in here. So kind of what does this tell us about our world and our society and the place of strawberry pickers and farm workers and undocumented people in our world here? What about the contrast here? What do you think? What is this telling us? Is this a fair world to you? Let me ask.
Anyone want to respond?
Anybody here think that it's fair or unfair? That's a simple question.
Yeah, completely unfair, completely.
Why?
Because,
Capitalist
oh,
society.
because I mean, no one should live like that in the first place. No one, zero. And I think it's especially disturbing because those who, like we were saying before, but I don't know if we agree on this, but those who employ, if you call it employ, but those who, I mean, when you have workers and you have somebody overseeing someone and make sure they're working fast enough, and you see how they're living right in front of your eyes. It's not like many of us who don't see it. One who's right there sees, and they don't take care, they're in charge, they're responsible, and they're not taking care to pay them better and improve their conditions. It's very, that the inhumanity of that is more upsetting. The fact that people do that to other people, then, I mean, it's very disturbing. It's very upsetting. And I'm thinking, what do we do? I mean, would we not eat strawberries? I mean, you know, I mean, what do we do about this? It's been going on forever.
Right. Well, we live in a very polarized world, right? We live in a world of rich and poor. And here in this picture, you can see it. I mean, I don't think that house on the top of the hill is a rich person's house, really. It doesn't look that wealthy, but it's certainly a lot better than living in a shack at the bottom of the ravine, right? Here's another one. And this was taken on the same hillside that the other shack is on. And this is a woman who's a Mixtec woman. So talking a little bit about, well, I want to tell you a little bit about this picture and then ask you. So she is a woman from southern Mexico, from Oaxaca. She speaks Mixteco, which is a language that was 1,000, 2,000 years old easily before Europeans ever got to the Americas. So she comes from what we call an indigenous community in Mexico. And a lot of farm workers in California, especially since the 80s, are coming from towns that are like this. And so she came across the border not that long before I took the picture. And here she is living with her son in a tent and going off and picking strawberries again in a field near San Diego. So, you know, I have kids. I assume that you parents on this, you know, Zoom here, you have children. So we all know how hard it is, how much work it is to raise kids, right? So think about the work she's going to go through to raise her son. Where's he going to take a bath? What about the, you know, the clothes that you see on the line there? I'm amazed that she actually found a place to wash them in order to hang them up. Where do you think she washed the clothes? You know, there's no sink and no faucet on this hillside, I can tell you that. And then look at the cooler by her feet. What is this cooler doing there? You know, this is where she is storing her food. So milk, right? Basic, something that a lot of kids need growing up. How many days do you think she can store milk in that cooler before it goes bad? And where is she going to go to buy more? All I'm saying is that all of the things that are difficult and that we know are a lot of work about raising kids, they just get multiplied a great deal by living on a hillside like this. And this is it. I'm not saying this is the reality for all farm workers, but I'm saying this is certainly her reality. And it also goes along with being undocumented. It goes along with being an indigenous person from an indigenous community, a recent migrant, and it goes along with being a farm worker. So this is Lorena Hernandez, and I actually have Lorena's oral history here, and I want to read it to you because I think what she had to say is very moving. So here she is picking blueberries. This is near Lamont and Arvin in the southern part of the San Joaquin Valley here. And here she is at home with her daughter. So she says, you know, to go pick blueberries, I have to get up at 4 in the morning. First, I make my lunch to take with me, and then I get dressed for work. For lunch, I eat whatever there is in the house, mostly bean tacos. Then the person who gives me a ride to work picks me up at 20 minutes to 5. We call him the raitero, which means the ride. His name is Rafael, and he comes with his wife. To be honest, I don't know them very well, but they pass by the house to pick me up. And I work as long as my body can take it, usually until 2:30 in the afternoon. They give me a ride home, and I get there by 3:30 or 4 in the afternoon, and by then I'm really tired. My daughter is still asleep when I go to work because we leave so early. We start working at 6, so I sleep on the way myself and wake up when we get to the field. There, the contractor gives us our buckets, and we wash our hands before picking the fruit. The job isn't that difficult to do, and I love seeing the buckets fill up. We know how many buckets we have to fill to have a successful day, and at the end of the day, I'm really tired, but I think that's also because of the heat. Remember, this is the San Joaquin Valley in the summer. They pay $6 a bucket, and each has to weigh 12 pounds. This is the second year I've picked blueberries. Since I don't have much experience, I can only do 15 or 16 buckets. Those with more experience can do up to 20 buckets a day. But when the ripe fruit is scarce, I can only pick 13. It depends on how many ripe blueberries the field has. To pick a lot, you also have to skip your lunch break. After a day of picking blueberries, my hands feel tired and dirty and mistreated. Our bodies are hot. And here are her hands. That's why I took a picture of her hands, because of what she told me. Our bodies are hot from working all day, and we immediately wash our hands with cold water. And later my hands hurt a lot. They don't give us gloves because they say it'll damage the fruit. I've been working since I turned 18 and now I'm 20. I really don't know my daughter anymore though. She doesn't even call me mama. She calls my aunt mama. She doesn't really understand that I get home tired. She just worries about my aunt and then brings her water and asks her how her day was. My daughter thinks my aunt is her mother. I understand why. My cousins all call my aunt Mama, and that's what she hears. My aunt says she'll understand when she's older. I don't really have a vision of my own future yet. I haven't really thought about it. I know I want to work every day. I don't have friends, just acquaintances from work. They don't have responsibilities like I do, so they go out on the weekend. They share their stories with me because since I have a daughter, I don't go out. I just stay at home. I wash my daughter's clothes on the weekend because during the week I'm so tired. There isn't time to clean the house during the week either. That's what we do on the weekends. I don't think I'll ever return to school because of my age. My job will be working in the fields. I would love to go back to school, but it's too late for me. Well, maybe someday. So I don't know, when she told me this, I was really, it just really got to me. And I don't know if it got to you, if there's anybody who wants to say anything about, how you feel about Lorena's experience. I mean, in a way, it's the experience of a young mother. She could be doing other work too, really, working as a janitor or working as some other job, but she does describe very graphically what it's like to work in the fields, and then what it means to her to have so little time to spend with her daughter, and then how much it hurt her that her daughter wouldn't even call her mama because she didn't see her that many hours during the day.
Laura
hard.
Garcia, I see your hand up.
Well, I think about what you said, $6 a bucket at $12 a pound each. And she can get to 13 maybe on a good day if her hands aren't hurting. So you're talking $78 a day is what she's making for all of that. And when you go to the market and you see those packs of blueberries, and sometimes they're on sale for $2 for $5. So, oh my gosh, the perspective there, it's unreal to me. It made me very sad and very aware. And that's the awareness I want to bring to my students. So thank you.
That's I'm really glad that you said that too, because, think of those, 16 buckets of blueberries that she's getting paid and how much she's getting paid for the bucket. And, blueberries, when you go to Safeway, blueberries are expensive. I don't buy blueberries very often. So how much, that say, $4 or $5 for that little, plastic clamshell box of blueberries. How much of it do you think she's getting? A nickel? 10 cents? Very tiny percentage of what we're paying in the supermarket for fruit and vegetables goes to the people whose labor produces it and who pick it. I think that's something that's really important for us to remember. Our food system is way out of whack, is way out of balance, where the people who do the basic labor of producing that food get so little of the money that we're paying for it. So I think it's really a way of saying that our food system needs to be reordered. It needs to be made more just.
Yeah,
So
I want to mention one more thing before you move on. With them getting paid too, during the wildfires, other extreme weather things that happen, when they're picking, they only get paid for what they pick. So when the fruit is damaged, if they're going through there and picking stuff, they don't get paid for that. So
Right.
sometimes during, again, like the wildfires, or there's floods or whatever's going on, they have to pick 3 times as much. So they're not doing less work, they're doing more work. And then they're only getting paid for the good fruit that they pick.
That's right. Or working during COVID times. People are going to work today in very dangerous circumstances because of the pandemic that's out there. And you would think that we would want people to get more money for working during these circumstances. And the reality is that not only are people not getting more money for it, but people are getting actually written out of the relief bills that are getting passed by Congress that are supposed to be helping us. The CARES Act, which was paying people $1,200, if you're undocumented, you can't get that. And not only that, if there's somebody in your family that you're living with is undocumented, nobody in your family can get it. And yet that money is supposed to help us to relieve the pressure. And so as a result of that, people have to go to work in order to pay the rent. And even if it's dangerous, even if the circumstances are not good. So I want to go back also to sort of like the daily reality of what life is like. And what do you think about this picture? What do you think about bending over here like this? What do you think it feels like at the end of the day if you're working like this? You know, this woman is cutting lettuce. I'll tell you another little piece of that one too, about the unfairness of it. You know, cutting lettuce like this used to be a high-paying job in agriculture, but it was only for men. Only men would be allowed to do this kind of work. And women fought to get those jobs. And when growers finally were forced to sort of stop discriminating, basically, they brought in what you see behind her, which is the lettuce machine. And the lettuce machine changed the way the work was being done so that instead of making those high wages, workers were making much closer to the minimum wage here in California. So women fought to get those jobs. And then when they got them, the wages were not what they had been before. And yet the actual physical work involved in doing it was the same. You know, there's no way you can cut a head of lettuce in a field without bending over like this. And so at the end of the day, it hurts. In fact, if you go to Salinas, which is sort of like the lettuce capital of the world, you see people walking in the streets with this very upright sort of stance. And a lot of the reason is because many people have had to have operations on their lower back, fusing their vertebrae because of the damage that you do to your vertebrae, to your spine, working like this over a period of 20 and 30 years. So that's kind of the story of this photograph. Anybody want to say anything about it? Any comment you want to make? We can go on. What about this one? So first of all, what we're looking at here, this is actually that same field that we were looking at the beginning, that potato field in the southern San Joaquin Valley. Took the picture in July. This is a pretty early morning. As you can see, the sun is just coming up there, but it's summer. So, you know, one question is, you know, if it's so hot and it's summer in July in the San Joaquin Valley, how come these workers have all these clothes on? So any of you who worked as farm workers or have farm workers in your family, you probably know the answer to this one. But it's sort of counterintuitive, right? Because most of us, if it gets up above 100 degrees, 105, 110 degrees, you know, we're down to our t-shirts and shorts, right? And you look at the workers here. If anything, you know, they're all bundled up. What do you think the reason for that is? Anybody have an idea here?
You know,
Oh, go ahead, Nora. Sorry.
when you're working, you start at 4 in the morning, it's really cold, so you dress really warm, and it gets really hot. It takes time to take off layers of clothes. Those are seconds that count. They're weighing your buckets, you're picking the bad fruit from the good fruit, you're measuring the fruit, you're carrying the ladder from one section of the tree to another. All those time factors, seconds count.
Yes, well, you know, another reason is that actually the clothing is good insulation. You know, it sounds counterintuitive, but it's true that that actually you are less hot if you are bundled up like this than if you start stripping down to your t-shirts and shorts. So it's not just because you want to protect yourself from the, you know, dust and the dirt out there, but it's also because the clothing itself is an insulation. You know, there's a lot of skill and knowledge that people have as farm workers about how to survive doing very difficult work under difficult circumstances. And this is just one little piece of it. What about this one? Why do you think, because obviously I took this picture at night, right? Why is he topping onions at night? What's going on here? Why would you be topping onions at night in the San Joaquin Valley in July? Think about it. What is it like in the San Joaquin Valley in July? How hot do you think it gets? 105, 110. So why would you be working at night?
So in the chat, we're seeing less heat and bugs.
Yeah, it's cooler. It's just, do you think people get paid an extra wage for working at night?
No.
No.
Not a chance, not a chance. But it's just another part of reality here. Here we go. So, you know, a lot of farm workers these days are very young. So the typical age for somebody crossing the border these days, and here we're talking about, you know, people who are crossing the border without papers especially, is about 20. You know, we hear a lot about unaccompanied children at the border, and that's true. But, you know, what it means for the people, because after all, young people coming across the border, like this young guy here, Salomon Sanchez, he you know, has to go to work like everybody else. In fact, the reason why people are crossing the border is to go to work, is to find jobs. So 20 years old, that's the average age. And there are a lot of young people working in the fields here. So here is Salomon Sarita Sanchez, and here is another young woman working on a onion bagging machine. Both, you know, he's working in Nipomo, near Santa Maria. She's working again near Arvin and Lamont. But the funny thing is that when I came up to both of them and started talking to them and asked if I could take their picture, they agreed. And I asked them, well, how old are you? And each of them said 18. So the first question I have for you is, do you believe it? And the second question is, why would they say 18? What do you think's going on there?
Well, they don't need to say 18 because it's legal to work at 12 in the United States. For child labor, laws do not pertain to agricultural labor. So they don't even need to say 18. Legally, you can work at the age of 12.
Well, I think the reality, though, is that the adults in the crews here have told them, if anybody asks you, say 18, so that we don't get in trouble for hiring kids in the fields. There are, you know, complicated laws about how old you have to be to work in a field. If you want to work in a field and you're younger than 16, you have to have permission. You have to have school permission and parents' permission to do that. You can't just show up. But one thing that, and so obviously, you know, if some white guy with a camera comes around and is asking you how old you are, you know, the people are in the crew are telling you, say 18. But the other thing, especially about her, and that is, you know, I took this picture during a weekday during the day. And so obviously she was not going to school. And for doing this particular job, each place on this machine, each worker is sitting in a particular place on the machine. And so they're not going to give a place to a worker who's not going to show up and work the whole day. So her being in this place means that she's not just working after school or on a weekend or something. She's working there all day, every day, instead of going to school. And that means that why does this happen? And I think it's really because it's very, very difficult for people's families to survive as farm workers on the labor of just adults. Sometimes the wages are so low and the work is hard to come by that everybody in the family who is able to work goes to work in order to produce income for the family. It's not because parents don't care about their kids going to school. It's not because kids don't want to go to school. After all, remember what Lorena Hernandez said. It's because of the economics of our system here that that the incomes of farm worker families are so low that this is kind of what the result of it is. But also there are old people out there. When I took a picture of Hermilo Sanchez here, he was 65, and I took this picture, probably about 7 years ago. So 65, that's getting up there, and it's hard work, doing this. You can see what he's doing is he's harvesting bell peppers, cutting bell peppers, throwing them in a box into a bin and carrying it over to the machine. So at some point though, Hermilo is not going to be able to work any longer and do this work any longer. So what is going to happen to him? If he is undocumented, first of all, is he going to be able to collect a Social Security check? Where is his income going to come from? How is he going to live? Older folks in our world have a hard time as it is anyway. I mean, for those of us who can get Social Security, it's pretty hard to live on Social Security payments. But if you don't have Social Security, then what? How is he going to live? What do you think? Anybody want to contribute an idea here? Who's going to support him?
He's going to keep working until he can't work anymore.
Yeah, he'll keep working as long as he can. But what happens when he can't work anymore? We all get to that age eventually. What happens when he can't do what he's doing here?
He may depend on younger members of his family if he has them.
Yeah, his family is going to have to support him. Hopefully he has a family that's going to support him. But it's like we are condemning old people to poverty here. And instead of taking responsibility as a society for what happens to these people who are doing this work, that after all, if he didn't do this, we wouldn't have the bell peppers to eat, right? But instead of taking responsibility for what happens to people when they get old, we're sort of saying, hey, not our problem.
And we have
that's not a fair system. Social Security was supposedly set up to solve that problem. But the reality of it is that Social Security, you cannot get Social Security. The irony of it is for undocumented people like Hermilo, he pays into the Social Security fund. Every check that he gets, they deduct money and they put it into the Social Security fund, but he cannot collect the benefit. Because if you're undocumented, you cannot get a Social Security number. So the money actually sits there in the fund, and everybody else who gets Social Security gets a little piece of it. For people who say that undocumented people are robbing, this shows you it's actually the opposite. It's not only people are contributing with their work, but people are paying for a benefit that they can't get. And since the idea of having Social Security is that we are all supposed to be taking care of older folks who took care of us when they get old, the system is not doing that. Well, it's about an hour. I don't know how much time we have for doing this. I'm perfectly happy to keep on going here, but Tani, maybe you could give me some guidance here on time questions.
Yeah, so I think because of the technical problems, we got started late. So should we keep going for another 10 minutes or so? And if anyone needs to take off, go ahead. And for those of you who can stay with us, then stay with us.
Great. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go through some pictures pretty quickly here because I want to come up, especially for the younger folks here. These are pictures of the culture that Indigenous people are bringing with them from their home communities. These are dance festivals that we have in California that are farm workers basically doing the dances of their hometowns. These are the children of farm workers from Indigenous communities. In our schools, we have children who are coming into schools speaking Mixteco and Zapoteco and Triqui, other Indigenous languages. And so here we have Nacida Cruz in Watsonville, who's a teacher's aide who comes into the classroom and helps kids, in this case, with their numbers in Mixteco, in the language of their hometown. So these are more Mixteco kids in school in Watsonville. Not everybody in California fields is Mexican. Here are people coming from the Punjab in India. Filipinos have been working in our fields, and so have Punjabis been working in our fields for over 100 years. And this is the picture I was looking for here. So this is a picture of Ray Guzman, and Ray Guzman is a rapper. And so here's what Ray says. Ray says, when I was in school, I would work in the fields on the weekends with my parents. And I left school at 19 and I started working full-time, and I've been working full-time in the fields for 3 years, and now I'm 21. Today, the day I interviewed him, I was picking peaches. I was very young when my mother first took me to work in the fields, about 8 or 10 years old. At first, only she and my older brother were working. My brother would work with her while the rest of us went to school. We're a family of 8, and I'm the youngest son, and my sister is the youngest of all of us. She took me to the field so that I could start to learn, so that I would be ready when I was old enough to work myself. I worked on the weekends, and then we would go to Oregon in the summer to pick blueberries and strawberries. My memories of those times are good because I was working with my family and the people from my hometown, and we all got along. We all came from the same town in Oaxaca, San Miguel Cuevas. When I first arrived in Fresno, I only spoke Mixteco. I still speak Mixteco with my mother and with people that speak Mixteco with me, but I speak Spanish with my brothers and English with my sister. So here he is, he's trilingual. Talk about, a young guy who's got a lot of knowledge there. I had to learn Spanish to speak with other people in the street and in school. And when I first arrived here, I thought everybody was going to speak Mixteco. And now I can speak with Mixteco with the people from my hometown, Spanish with Latinos, and English is an international language. I graduated from high school. I was the first in my family to do it. My mother was so proud that she threw me a party. It felt good to stand on stage and hear my name being called. I felt sad immediately afterwards, though, because I didn't know what I was going to do with my diploma. I went to work in Oregon right after graduating because I was saving up money for a car. But the money seems to slip away. It's not much to begin with, and the money you earn in a week goes to rent and food and gas and a cell phone bill. Many of my friends talk about returning to Oaxaca, but if I go, I can't come back here in the passenger seat of a car. I have to come back in a car trunk or walking through the desert. If they pass an amnesty law, I'll be forever grateful. That would be a dream for those of us who are undocumented and have graduated from school. It's so sad to graduate and not be able to do anything with your education. So I'm going to be a rap star. I think I'm going to be big, but I'm going to be a rapper with a conscience. My idol is Tupac Shakur. He was a rapper who spoke about politics. He spoke about all of us kids in poverty. He talked about our lives. It's like Tupac used to say, we're a flower that grew up in concrete. You can see the rose and the stem is twisted, but it grew out of the hard concrete. We're from the hood, but we're going to come up. Some people may not want us to achieve much, but we're human too. So Ray Guzman and his compa there, Miguel Villegas, they are the first Mixteco rappers. And they rap now all over California. In fact, outside of California, they do their rap. And I think it's really interesting because it's sort of like also cultures that don't change, don't live. So here they are combining this Mixteco culture and language of their hometown in Oaxaca with rap and Tupac Shakur and, performing for young people here. So I don't know if you have anything you want to say about Ray and his story here, but I found his story a real moving one as well too. So, okay, just a few more pictures as we go and get to the end here. So who's here? Anybody know who this is? Anybody recognize her?
Dolores Huerta.
Oh, thank you very much. And who's Dolores? Who's Dolores Huerta?
She helped formed the United Farm Workers with Cesar Chavez
That's right.
in the 60s,
That's right.
1960s. She's over 90 now, and she's still active,
That's right.
participated in politics.
That's right. Just,
Yeah, very
just,
strong woman, a lot of fortitude, a lot of strength, a lot of leadership. All these years.
and here's the kind of thing that Dolores organized over the years. And this is a strike, a farm worker strike in Salinas. And so here are the workers on the left here with the bullhorns, and they're calling out to the people who are working in the fields to come out and join them in the strike. And in front of them is who? The sheriff. What's the sheriff doing there? Protecting the field and protecting the grower, basically, and trying to keep the strikers from going into the field and having the going and trying to get the workers to come out. This is another scene of workers in the union. I worked for the union as an organizer for a number of years, and one of the things I really loved about the union was that we sang songs in the meetings, and we would hold our arms together like this, and we would sing De Colores or other songs like that. It was a beautiful culture. And of course, once the unions got started here in Delano in the grape strike in the 60s, it spread all over the country. And so these are mushroom workers in Pennsylvania who organized a union there. And here's a strike by people who pick blueberries up in Washington State, near the Canadian border, near Bellingham and Mount Vernon. And of course, one of the things that their new union does is that it tries to help the workers who are having to work during the period of time of the pandemic here. And so this is a strike that took place in Washington State that this new union helped organize. And she's saying apoyo para los enfermos, which means support the people who are sick. And so this is workers who are asking for protective equipment during the time they go to work. They are asking for money to support people who do get sick so that they can go and isolate themselves at home. You know, if you're having trouble paying the rent every paycheck, you certainly don't have any money left over if you get sick to go and isolate yourself from your family and go live in a motel room for 2 weeks while you go through the quarantine. So it can be a very dangerous situation for somebody to get sick from the COVID in a farm worker family because, you know, there's no money to do the things that you might be able to do if you had a higher income, like isolate yourselves, or just simply get paid hazard pay for the work, having to work during these dangerous circumstances. And these workers worked in a shed, in an apple shed where, you know, people were getting sick a lot because of the COVID. And that's something that's happening to farm workers and people who work in meatpacking plants, who are all basically immigrant workers from somewhere else who are getting sick during this time of the virus. And these are workers organizing themselves to go on one of the immigrant rights marches. And here's a young woman picking persimmons. Again, this is during the time of the COVID, so you can see, you know, people, she's, you know, using the mask and trying to work in a safe way as far as she can get from other people who are working around her. And another woman with the mask working during these COVID times. And here's one reason why it is dangerous for workers also, and that is that if you don't have a lot of money to pay for rent, what happens is that a lot of family members, for instance, live in very confined circumstances. So this is a Purepecha family, an indigenous family in Oxnard. And this is the bedroom of this family, and you can see all the bunk beds. And so, first of all, it can be, you know, I mean, families are close, and there's a lot of warm feeling that that you can get, families get from everybody, you know, living close to each other. But also, you know, to be honest, it's difficult because there's no privacy. in a bedroom like this. And when you're growing up, and especially when you get to be a teenager and you want to have some privacy, it can be hard to have it. And so you look at the ages of the young women here in this family, and you can imagine what they might be going through. But also during the time of the pandemic, this can be also very dangerous, just simply because having everybody living so close together means that if somebody gets sick at work, if the parents get sick at work, that everybody in the family is going to get exposed to it. And this is one of the reasons why the infection rate among farm workers is so high. You know, the per capita rate of infection among people in rural counties in California, Tulare County and Kern County and Fresno County, is more than twice as high. In fact, it's more than 3 times as high as it is in the urban counties like San Francisco or Santa Clara, Silicon Valley. And that's because of poverty, basically. It's because of not having money. And, you know, poverty and COVID and the pandemic, they go together. So I think that's it. That's the last slide I have in my series. And I want to thank you for letting me talk with you today and for the participation that you've had, and apologize again for the technical problems we had at the beginning. And I hope that this is, you've enjoyed it and we've been able to learn from each other's experience here.
Thank you so much, David. This has been really, really insightful and moving, and I think we've learned so much. Can I ask you one question to wrap things up? And that is, how can we be part of the solution? Do you have some ideas of things that we can all be doing to help improve these conditions?
Well, I think first thing is to increase our awareness of what lives are like for people who are producing the food, so that so that the people who do this work in these families don't become invisible. I think that's something that's very important. Then also, we saw pictures here of workers who were going on strike, or Dolores Huerta, for instance, organizing for justice for farm workers. And so it's important to support those efforts when we know about them. So for instance, during the time when workers were organizing the United Farm Workers, they would go on strike, for instance, in the grape fields in the San Joaquin Valley, and they would ask consumers not to buy grapes during the strike, during the time. And so many of us, you know, particularly people of my age, grew up not eating grapes for a long time because they were being boycotted. Yes, you too, Marjorie, I see you raising your hand. Yes, we all kind of learned about the boycotts, and they're still going on. When the workers got organized and organized their union up in Washington State, they began boycotting the Driscoll Berry Company, because Driscoll's was the company that they were going on strike. So learn about what workers are doing, and then support them in the efforts that they are making to try to change their circumstance. And you can learn about this by going up to websites. There's a website for the United Farm Workers. There's a website for the Dolores Huerta Foundation. There are websites for food justice organizations. There's one called Civil Eats. There's another one in Washington State called Community to Community. That's all one word with a number 2 in the middle, Community to Community. And these are all places where you can learn about what farm workers are doing and learn about the kinds of help that they are asking for from people who live in cities and people who, after all, we all eat what farm workers produce. And so I think it's to be aware of it and to be concerned about it and to try to reach out and to form those connections with the people who are doing this work.